Hey! You! Yeah, you! With the face! Come on over here and rejoin me in another episode of what I have chosen to call A History of Rock and Roll in Film and Rock and Roll. You may call it what you like. But it's another in a ever-lengthening series of Van Halen episodes. And I promised at some point in the last episode that I would be focusing on Better Off Dead, I think, very soon. And I still am. But I ended up focusing more on extra Van Halen content that allows me to stretch out this one more episode with the remainder of my wildlife reactions and discussions before jumping off to Better Off Dead, which I found to be a super pleasing experience watching that. I could be criticized and hated even for being of a 46-year-old personage and having never watched that movie all the way through. That's true. It's true. I take all of your shock and outrage on to my personal self-worth, and I will weigh it against the deeds and the thoughts and the actions and the hopes and the dreams that I have intended and attempted to personify in my entire 46 years of life, and I will see if I still deserve to live after weighing them all against the accusation that I should have definitely watched Better Off Dead in its entirety by this point. I will leave the rest of that conversation for the next episode, because we have a lot to get to. And I decided to filter this one with a Eddie Van Halen perspective from 1990, and then some Sammy Hagar first meetings with Van Halen and Eddie in particular perspectives, and some extra thoughts about that era. I will also interject the final segment of my conversation with my good friend Eve, who you've heard talking to me on the previous episodes. And then we will kind of wrap things up. We'll bounce back to Sammy stuff. We'll bounce back to Eddie stuff before the end. And save a lot of the more complicated stuff for the final Van Halen episode. That episode's going to have a lot of jumping around in the timeline, more perspectives from other band members we don't hear from as much, quite frankly. It's going to be more convoluted. It's going to be more bouncy aroundy, and I wanted to save the Better Off Dead segments for that because I found out more about that film than I expected to, that I feel is very compelling when it comes to the kind of conversations we have here on A History of Rock and Roll in Film and Rock and Roll. And when I say conversations, I mean me talking at you and you being there where you are. And I appreciate that. You might not think I do, but how are you going to prove it? Huh? Right? Good one, Jay. I do explicitly want to let you know that I appreciate the fact that you're listening to a very unformatted show just done by one person, and you get to listen to all my guitar demos and stuff that I've come up with here in the living room where I record while I've been between jobs. And on the subject of being in between jobs, this one is something I would do for a living if I could at the time that you're hearing this, or at the time that I'm recording this. Not so much an option, but every little bit helps. So please check out some links in the description. Maybe buy a shirt. That's a few bucks for me. Maybe subscribe to the Patreon. That's a few bucks for me. maybe just go to the PayPal link and donate some cash so that your scheming spouse or child doesn't get it. Because what are they going to use it for, right? I mean, it's someone else's. If you keep the money in the bank for very long, someone's going to get it from you, and they don't deserve it. I do. Maybe it's your wife who's going to use it to go on a date with the pool boy. That's a thing that exists, right? Maybe it's your kid who's going to spend the money on books about anarchy or in-app purchases for Fortnite. I think that's kind of what they're more into these days. Or just a human slave that they can have trafficked from, various places around the world. Think about it, won't you? Do you really want your money to go to human slavery, or do you want it to go to the person who has foolishly decided to spend many, many days, months, weeks, and even hours and minutes of time attempting to be the Dan Carlin of rock and roll and films? Personally, I don't think it's much of a choice at all. And if you want to just use someone else's credit card, that's okay with me too. Are they going to miss that money? Probably not, with all the weird stuff they get up to, if you know what I mean. Selling bootleg Kahler tremolos made out of chocolate to unsuspecting young guitar virtuosos in training. What child deserves to have a chocolate bootleg Kahler tremolo attached to their guitar and experience the sadness that comes with trying to replicate Eddie Van Halen's Eruption with such a silly item attached to bolted onto an alder body? Phooey, I say to that. Nuts to that, even if I were to use the nomenclature of an older generation before a previous older generation. Anyway, kick back and enjoy some Van Halen and some Wildlife, and I will see you at the end. Well, I'll see you all through it because it's still me. It's all my voice. I don't know. I keep thinking I'm like producing this with a team or something. Fucking Edward R. Murrow here. Like I'm throwing it to somebody out there on the scene, down in the trenches, reporting. Thank you, Jay. It's Jay here. You're looking good back there in the studio. Now let's consult the text, which is a Guitar World from February 1990 with an exclusive interview with Edward Van Halen, Player of the Decade. Who would have thought that Guitar World would have the exclusive Van Halen interview in 1990 when they've decided to put Van Halen on the cover as their Player of the Decade? That's the only Van Halen Player of the Decade interview he's giving exclusively in February 1990, people. There's a lengthy introduction, which is nice. It's sort of centered around the sort of mess that his studio is in and his upcoming move into another house with Valerie Bertinelli, and how casual he is with his gear, and how he doesn't like keep the guitars in cases or anything. He's always just kind of tossing them around, throwing them in the car without any protection. Points out little pieces of equipment here and there, like, oh, that's right over there. There's that Electro Harmonix, the keyboard I used on Sunday afternoon in the park. There's the Destroyer I used to use. He motions to one of the guitars hanging on the wall. That was the one on Women and Children First. Oh, and here's what a Variac looks like, et cetera, et cetera. The narrative goes into a little bit of a retrospective on where Van Halen, or how Van Halen sort of burst upon the scene in the 70s at a time when no one really thought, these kind of things could be done with the guitar. And then even more popular in the early 80s when people like Pete Townsend in 82 were saying that, guitar was going to be obsolete very soon in popular music. Playing on Beat It, the invitation from Steve Lukather and Quincy, meeting Quincy Jones and playing on that track, and how effortless sort of his solo sounded to the uninitiated ears of people that didn't listen to hard rock, took a lot of people by surprise. And I think if you're a big Van Halen fan, you can sort of just see Beat It as like a pastiche or a medley of a few different techniques that he's used on lots of other Van Halen solos. And in this case, it was just sort of, it's like, but when you haven't heard that a bunch of times and you hear it in the context of a pop song, it's a little different. And that was what helped propel that song. I mean, not that Michael Jackson needed help getting to the top of the charts, but he did need help getting MTV airplay. It notes that they caved in to record company pressure to play Billie Jean because there was an unwritten rule at MTV about not playing black artists for the longest time until Billie Jean was so big. And the article wants to sort of credit Beat It for, I think, a lot more of Michael Jackson's success than is warranted, as if white people never bought Michael Jackson records before. I mean, he had quite a history of pleasing mainstream audiences since he was like 7 years old. So I don't know. I don't know that I agree with that take on it, but maybe I could agree with that for like the music market at the time, the listener base at the time that was maybe younger and white and hadn't grown up with, ABC or, Off the Wall, stuff like, and anything in between. I know there's plenty in between, but, maybe their parents listened to that. And when they were out at a disco, you know what I'm saying? But one thing I'm picking up on this introduction about Beat It that I hadn't considered before, or if I had, I forgot, was, I think we've covered somewhere else in the series on Van Halen that he took the tape from Lukather, chopped it all up, and then played a solo over it in spots that Lukather was not expecting or wasn't prepared for, and they had to re-edit it. And it's that's not mentioned here. What is mentioned is that he did surprise them by playing over the verse part, instead of the breakdown part. So supposedly that, that heavy breathing, dun 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 dun, beat it part was supposed to be where he was soloing, and he picked up after that little bit, which is kind of cool. I didn't think about it that way. And then we get into the conversation, and I'm not gonna, it's not a Patreon episode. I'm not just gonna read verbatim the whole thing off the page. I'll sort of duck in and out of what I think is relevant. But I will warn you, you will hear some things that you've heard before, tidbits of information. I don't care that that's a little redundant, though, because I want to revisit where Eddie's head was at in 1990, as opposed to looking back 2 decades later, or what he said initially in the 70s or 80s about certain things. I think for someone that's been around that long, it's worthwhile to sort of check in with them at different points along the timeline and see what their opinions are about things that they've already talked about or would talk about again later. So there's after this 2-3 page introduction. Do y'all want some coffee out there? Valerie Bertinelli calls from the kitchen, her cheery face pressed close to the screen window. Sure, okay. Sorry, that wasn't a good read. Use take 2. Eddie calls back, though he'll barely take 2 sips of the Java once it's poured. I think we all know people like that. People walk around leaving open cans of soda or beer or freshly poured cup of coffee on a table somewhere as they walk around to do other things and then come back to later and just dump it out because it's gone cold or gone warm in the case of the cold beverage. People that have a lot on their mind don't focus on something like sitting and drinking a beverage like most of us do. I had a bass player singer who, like, he's the guy that a day after a party, in your partying days when you have a lot of friends over, he's the guy that's probably most to blame for the next morning when you're picking up ostensibly empty aluminum cans of beer that are laying around on various flat surfaces, and you find a lot of very heavy ones that have been opened and wasted and gone bad because somebody forgot that they had opened them and then walked away and then opened another one. And everyone knows that's not their beer, so they don't drink it either. Anyhow, they start talking about, his accomplishments for the past decade. And Van Halen just acknowledges that he changed the way people play electric guitar after the first album came out, and he's proud of that. And They talk about the early days we've already discussed. Playing 5 sets of top 40 was not a thing that Van Halen could really do or wanted to do, so they'd get kicked out of a lot of clubs for only having like 1 hour of decent danceable material for the crowds there. And they were way louder than everybody. So Eddie says, the club scene nowadays, I'm not too familiar with. I don't even know where to go if I want to go to a club. I don't get out much. The interviewer mentions pay for play being a thing happening. And Eddie's like, at Gazzari's? I heard about that. You have to pay to play? Bands have to pay something like $1,500 to play. Wow, 1990, $1,500. I tell you, making $75 a night isn't much better, laughs. It sure isn't enough to buy equipment with. I mean, Alex and I used to have to go around paint house numbers on curbs to make extra money. I should mention the article is written and presumably interview conducted by Joseph Basso. If you know anything else written by Joseph Basso or his other work you would recommend, please call in and let me know. He's asked about players from the past decade that impressed him. He says, well, there's Satriani and Vai. They're excellent players. I don't really listen to anything. I'm always wrapped up in doing my own stuff, always writing. He mentions a band he's producing called Private Life, and Danny Johnson. I love the way he plays. He's got that Louisiana blues sound, but he can also have the fire of Alan Holdsworth. He's got the vibe I really like. They mentioned he pioneered two-hand tapping. Oh, is that true? Guitar World in 1990. We never would have guessed. I don't know if I was the first one to do it. I mean, I'm sure that somebody else thought of it too. He laughs. He says, the funny thing is, I think I've mellowed out in my old age. I see a lot of people using it as a trick, but to me, it's just the way I play. It's not like, uh-oh, I'm going to do a trick now. I mean, you see this from other guys playing, and then it's, watch this, a trick, like a vibrato bar. I don't use it as a trick, but as a way to play. I think I've gotten a little tastier through the years. I don't play as recklessly. I'm a little more melodic. I guess I'm much more into songs and songwriting. And he says, whether I tap or not, I'm still a good player. If that's all I'm known for, then goddamn. He says, when I first started playing, I was like, as fast as I could go, It was fun. But as you mature a little bit, you see there's no point to it, and you start using your technique to bring out your style. Later, he's asked about mistakes that appeared on Van Halen records, because unlike a lot of people, he actually acknowledges that kind of a thing. And he goes, oh, all kinds of stuff. I don't think there's any one song of ours that's done right all the way through. Sometimes I'm out of tune a little bit. I heard Where Have All the Good Times Gone on the radio the other day, and I'm doing these harmonics. Missed them. I kind of chuckled. But most people would have removed their mistakes, he says, the interviewer. Especially nowadays, says Eddie. Everything's so technically advanced. I'm not really a perfectionist in that sense. I'm more for a vibe. That's an interesting perspective, I think, to remember about him. He was a perfectionist in a lot of ways, but not in that way, which is it just makes him so unique. So fun. The fun, going back to the earliest episode in this Van Halen series, the fun of Eddie Van Halen is what was missing from all these other technical players, really. They mentioned the cover of Pretty Woman. Eddie says, you forgot part of the bridge, or the interviewer, rather. Yeah, I fucked up. I never bought the record. I don't know how the song went, so it was, I think this is how it goes, And so we did it and realized later it was wrong. I met Roy Orbison at Farm Aid. I don't even know if he knew we did it, Everybody was pushing for cover tunes on Diver Down, so I said, well, let's at least do Pretty Woman. It's got a riff, unlike some of the other stuff we were doing. Did you intend to go right from Intruder into Pretty Woman? Oh, that was an afterthought. We'd done the video for Pretty Woman and needed something else for it. So we went in the studio and just tagged that on. I was drinking a beer. That's me sliding the can on the strings. Aroo, aroo. They say Van Halen's sound on the first couple records is very much that raw live band. But this has changed somewhat. Now it's a fuller, more produced sound. Yeah, well, the main thing in the beginning was that I had never been in a studio before. I remember asking Ted Templeman and Don Landy, hey, do you mind if I just play like I do live? Because I don't have any rhythm parts underneath the solos. I don't know how to overdub. That's why it sounds live, because it is. What noticeable changes are there in the way you now lay down basic tracks? He says, see, a lot of times I'll still do a live solo, but I'll just overdub the rhythm part underneath. I guess we're just getting better at recording. The technology's advanced so much since 77. Do you think your guitar sound has changed any? He says, believe it or not, I'm using the exact same stuff that I always have. I have an old Baby Marshall and Kramer's. I started playing those about 5 or 6 years ago. I don't know. I just turn everything all the way up. I used to use those old MXR Phase 90s on all the solos. It's kind of a cool sound. I don't use that much now, though. I have a rack that looks like computer shit, but I don't even know what's on it. The only thing I use is a little bit of delay and a couple of harmonizers. It's not a real tight echo. I don't know how to explain this. Laughs. See, all I do is make music. I don't go out. Really. I just sit up here on the hill in my studio. I've always been that way, so nothing's different. A lot of people want to be successful so they can go out and party and have fun. But to me, making music is the fun part. I'm a weirdo. I mean, that's my life. You just saw out there, points in the direction of the studio. Of course, now it's all torn apart. Beat It created such a buzz. How did your involvement with that song come about? Quincy Jones called me up to ask if I wanted to play on Michael Jackson's record. Of course, at the time, Guitar World says, Jackson wasn't the pop icon he is now. Van Halen says, I didn't think he was, but when that record came out, it sure was a big one. It was really funny. I was out back, and something was wrong with the phone, and there are always people calling me, so I'm saying hello, and there's this guy going, hello, and we couldn't hear each other, so I hung up, and then I get this call again. Is this Eddie? It's Quincy, man. And I'm like, who the fuck? What do you want, you fucking asshole? I swear to God. So finally he says, it's Quincy Jones, man. And I'm going, oh, shit, I'm sorry, man. It was really funny because after the record, he wrote me a letter thanking me, signed, the fucking asshole. He mentions that, no, he didn't work out the solo before he cut it. He says, I just noodled along. Actually, changed part of the song, though, because they wanted me to solo over ba-bump, bump, ba-bump, bump. So I said, can we edit it to a verse so there's some chord changes? And I just soloed over what I thought would be the solo section. I did 2 solos, and they picked the one they liked, and that was it. It took about 20 minutes to do, and there's Michael Jackson standing in the back going, I really like that high-fast stuff that you do. Laughs. They mentioned that, you haven't been doing this on other people's records. We assume that other artists are now probably wanting to call you to jump in and be on their stuff. He says, yeah, well, just recently Stevie Nicks, Steve Perry, everybody's calling. Thank God I have an answering machine. Believe it or not, I did the Michael Jackson thing because I figured nobody'd know. I swear to God, the band, for one, Roth and my brother and Mike, they always hated me doing things outside of Van Halen. They'd say, keep it in the band. And it just so happened that Roth was on one of his Amazon jungle trips or whatever he does, and Al was out of town, and Mike was out at Disneyland or something. So I couldn't consult them, so I just said, fuck it, I'll do it, and no one will ever know. So then it comes out, and it's the song of the year and everything. My brother still won't let me live it down, and I did it for free, too. What about the Tone Loc thing? Okay, this I don't know about. He gets excited, I guess, and he says, oh, right, yeah. I'm sitting around watching MTV the other day, and I'm, oh, yeah, of course, this is the sample. This is the sample on Wild Thing. It's Janie's crying. Because the other one is Christine 16, like Funky Cold Medina. Dun, 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 God. That's Kiss's Christine 16 mixed with a little bit of, was it Bad Company or Free? Chicka-dan, Funky Cold Medina. And then it ends with, it's that, you don't have to live this hand, motor sample finishes hand. Is it all right now? They stole those open sort of chords from chicka-dan. It's the whole chorus of Funky Cold Medina, and then it ends with the tail end of it is that awesome little tail from Christine 16, which is a song about getting some awesome little tail. Hey! Different times. Let's see. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. Watch TV, and I'm like, that sure sounds like my guitar and Al's drums. And then Guitar World's like, wait a second. The story I got from the label is that you were consulted. Hell no. I was just sitting there, and I hear my brother's drums, and then there's my guitar. And I called up the manager and I say, what is this shit, you know? So I guess he called them up and say they should at least thank us. So I guess we're thanked on the record. This is done all the time nowadays, says Guitar World. A lot of rap uses hard rock and heavy metal guitar samples. I think it's a bullshit thing. I mean, why don't they just have someone else play it? It's kind of thin, you know? Let me ask about your hearing. Does a situation like Pete Townshend's give you any cause for concern or pause for concern? Well, I'll tell you one thing I don't do, and that's stack my cabinets. Even in the old days when I used to have the mountainous shit, I only used the bottom cabinets. Just don't stand in front of the stuff. I like to stand in front of them so I can feel my arm hairs move, but not the hair on my head. You mentioned Satriani and Vi before, but did anyone else come up during the 80s that had you sweat maybe a little? No. See, nobody makes me sweat. If anything, when I hear somebody good, it inspires me. Sorry. Reading this for the first time just makes me happy to the inherent sort of innocence and goodness of that. Like when I first heard Holdsworth, that made me want to play. To me, music isn't a competitive thing. There are so many good players around. I'm not in competition with them. I'm not out to be better than anybody. Music is such a personal thing. How can you say someone's better than someone else? They mentioned he's pretty involved with Holdsworth for a little while there. Yeah, I got him signed to Warner Brothers because I just hated to see this guy who's so amazing selling guitars to stay alive. So I got him signed. We were on tour in South America. I hate to say this. I was supposed to co-produce the record with Ted Templeman and Don Landee, and he just didn't want to wait like 2 weeks, you know? So he did it himself, and it ended up being just another Alan Holdsworth record. The guy needs direction, you know what I mean? We did a couple of demos before I went to South America, and one of the songs was great. So he blew it, I think. I really think I could have, well, not necessarily pulled him back, but steered him in a different direction, you know? I was over at my friend Steve Lukather's house, and he played me Alan's new record. And I tell you, I couldn't tell the difference between that and his other records. I mean, I don't want to rag the guy, because he's an incredible player, and he's a good friend. I love the guy. He just needs direction. That's all. Has there been any other point where you tried to step in and work with him? Yeah, I just talked with him on the phone about a month ago. He called up and asked if I want to do something together with him, and I'd love to, except I don't really have the time right now. When the time is right, sure, it'd be fun. I don't give a fuck if it's good or not. Like the thing I did with Brian May, that wasn't good, but it was fun. I'd sure like to see how Holdsworth does some of the stuff he's doing, but I never have the nerve to ask him. God damn it, Eddie. It takes me 2 hands to do what he's doing with one. I don't know how he does it. I mean, I have a hell of a reach too, you know? What I'd also love to do is pick Jimmy Page's brain about how he got some of those sounds. It'd be more sounds than, how do you play this? What's your take on Page these days? He's getting a bad rap. And that's bullshit. He's a genius. I assume getting a bad rap meaning people don't really care about his influence anymore in 1990. I guess like he was more focused on the remastered Led Zeppelin box set than like putting out any music. He had done some, you know, stuff in the 80s didn't really take off. So I assume getting a bad rap means people kind of devaluing his influence over guitar playing now that things have progressed so much further past him. That's just all I can do is sort of read into that, thinking about the context of the time. But he's a genius. He's a great player, a songwriter, producer. So there you go. Put it this way. He might not be the greatest executor of whatever, but when you hear a Page solo, he speaks. I've always said that Clapton was my main influence, but Page was actually more the way I am. I'm in a reckless, abandoned kind of way.
Show starts in 8 minutes. Yum, yum. It's time for a tasty and refreshing snack.
Okay, so there's
adorable little scene with the Vietnam obsessed kid that looks like Joey Lawrence messing with a cop car underneath sneaking underneath and planting something. And then there's the fallout with the cop and Leah Thompson, who confronts him about being a cheater. And credit to him, he didn't say anything terribly insulting to her like I would have expected, or intimidating, to make sure she never yaps about it. But holy smokes, young Leah Thompson is incredibly good at projecting or portraying emotion with very little being said. And you really, really feel bad for her. And then Eric Stoltz shows up to confront him and takes a swing at him for banging his ex-girlfriend, who's underage. And cop, knocks him down, almost arrests him, decides to let him go, gets in his car, drives away, and then these explosions go off underneath the car that aren't explained. We don't know how they work, but 4 or 5 of them go off, and he ends up ramming into the donut sign and getting out and going, shit! And I mean, I feel like in the real world, he would have just pulled he could have then pulled his gun and just shot Eric Stoltz in the face. He would have easily had probable cause. To think that there was an improvised explosive device attached to his car then that means it was attempted murder, and he's gonna, he did what he did in self-defense. And he killed this young cop killer, radical American terrorist, or something to that effect.
There was definitely a ongoing question in my mind as far as how much Sammy Hagar voice to give by the time I was done with all the Van Halen stuff. And I don't think it would be fair to not cover his side of things. And I think it makes for, a better sort of overall picture. But not just that, just... if you weren't paying attention to Van Halen when they were doing Van Halen stuff, especially sniping at each other in the press, then, this could be somewhat illuminating, maybe. I don't necessarily believe anyone in particular's story more than the other when it comes to Eddie versus Dave or Eddie versus Sammy, but I do I see a common theme of everything being Eddie's call, when it comes to making the important decisions in Van Halen, and Eddie being unhappy with people after a while and just needing to move on. I don't know why that means that always ends badly. Whatever. It just seems like there's no one. I don't think Eddie has anyone to blame but himself when it comes to how things went with his Van Halen relationships, let's say. That's me being a little judgmental, maybe, but I think pretty fair based on what I've been reading. So the point where Sammy comes into the picture with Van Halen he is at a weird crossroads in his life. He's obviously, I mean, maybe not obvious if you haven't been aware of his career. He's done a lot in rock up to this point already. He's accomplished more than most people in the business will ever hope to accomplish. But he's spent some time alone and being obsessed with this book called The Coming Hard Times, by someone who said the banks were going to collapse, everything was going to fall apart, the bottom's going to come out of society, and gold was the only thing that would be valued. Paper money would be worth nothing. I really believed this shit. I was looking for a cabin in the woods with 100 acres. I was stocking up food. I got guns. I had all my ammunition, not to kill people, but to eat. I learned how to kill animals. I went hunting all the time. I learned how to kill a deer and skin it, how to cure it and eat it. I was going to go Ted Nugent on everybody. I was going to hunt and fish. I was going to put a racetrack on the spread and have all my cars. I mean, this is such a successful, rich, little boy kind of fantasy, isn't it? I mean, it's not a fantasy because he can pay for it, so it can be a reality, but it's like, I'm just going to have all my favorite cars and I'm going to drive them around really fast and nobody can stop me, and I'm going to live like Davy Crockett. Doesn't sound like a bad life. I'm not saying that. I would like this kind of a setup myself. Absolutely. But it's that I think it just belies a mentality of someone who's been maybe overworked and they've been on the road too long, or they've been surrounded by people too much. These are my impressions. I didn't even read the page before this, so I don't even know if that's the case with his mentality. But it just seems to point out a mentality of someone who's burned out and is overexposed to people and feels put upon. And needs to take some healthy time off, because you make a choice like that and you isolate yourself from society, you get weird when you have the power to make that happen and you're not forced to mingle with people and listen to other opinions and adjust to someone else's needs or lifestyle. You get weird. You end up like a guy someone told me about once. This person was a public defender in the local sort of legal system, and for once not my friend John Drenning, who I bring up every now and then. They talked about a older man who they've represented in court multiple times, who just gets caught for DUIs on a regular basis, and he's so old and he has no one in his life and he has no job. He's retired and he's just pissing away the remaining years he's got by being drunk all the time, and he doesn't care anymore. He's refused to reform. He's refused to go into treatment, and he just accepts the 1 year in jail he gets. He's done it multiple times. Just a year in the whatever the county jail is, and then he gets out, and then he goes back to drinking and driving because no one's going to change him. And he lives in a remote part of the state. So I keep that in my head sometimes when I think I might be getting a little too much of my own way and a little too much control over how isolated I can be, and how much nobody can tell me what to do or how many drinks to have alone. Not good. So anyways, it doesn't sound to me like Sammy wants to be an old drunk. I'm saying that this is equally as unhealthy. Getting your own way. This is the rich guy version of getting your own way. That old man who gets DUIs all the time is the poor man's version of getting your own way. So he says, the more I thought about things, the more I decided to stop the grind. Album tour for the rest of my life, and for my wife and family. I was burned out. I've been on the road for more than 10 years. And before that, I'd had a hard life. Work. Now I had everything going. I had my bike stores, my travel agency, my fire sprinkler business. I had my apartment buildings. My business manager had done a great job for me. I was set. I didn't even need any royalties. I was at a peak, and I felt like the fucking king. I could do whatever I wanted. I had $3 million in the bank, and I could see daylight. Now, I haven't told you what year this is yet, but you're going to understand where we're at here in the timeline in a sec. I could do one more record and one more tour, put away another $2 million, and retire altogether. Doesn't that sound like the beginning of a movie, a crime movie? Maybe not more than a rock and roll movie. Not saying he wants to go into crime. I'm saying there's always that, well, all we got to do is score one more big job, and then we can quit this life of crime. and then the movie starts and it all goes to shit. Or it just leads to someone spending their entire life, in that system and never getting out of it. He says, between all the other businesses and the money I already had, it was not necessarily a lot of income. Yes, it was, Sammy, but it certainly was more than enough to live on. Jesus Christ. It wasn't a lot. Yeah, I've got 7 jobs plus my royalties. I'm not really making a lot of money. This is how detached. This is, I would say, well, it seems like he's a little detached from the real world. But then again, he writes love songs about flying around with aliens and stuff on Van Halen records. So I was ready to give up everything. Betsy was pressuring me. I was seeing things her way. I assume that's his wife. And then Eddie Van Halen called. That's the end of chapter 6. The beginning of chapter 7 is 5150. Says, I came off the tour. I was fried crisp. I cut off all my hair. I canceled the last 4 dates on the tour after I hurt my foot, twisted my ankle in Connecticut, and couldn't walk on it. I tried to do one show like that, gave up, and went home. We had done 90 shows that year. That's what? That's less than 2 shows a week, though. Just saying. My Ferrari 512, the car from I Can't Drive 55, the video, it was sitting in Claudio Zampoli's shop in Van Nuys, where I bought it. He was an Italian mechanic who doubled as a salesman. Any mechanic that works at a car dealership doubles as a salesman. I have turned. Well, if you work in that department, it's your job to upsell customers on more modifications. I've interviewed for a similar job, not as a mechanic, but working in that department for the local Lexus dealership. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can keep doing. I don't know if I can grow old doing sales, folks. I don't know if I can do it. But we'll see how hungry I get. He was an Italian mechanic who doubles as a salesman. He's the guy I'm actually talking to at the beginning of the I Can't Drive 55 video. He didn't run a dealership or anything, but he'd buy a car for you. He used to work for Ferrari as a test driver. Took 9 months to get the 512 after I ordered it. This is fascinating, Sammy. Thank you so much. They made like 12 that year. Anyway, I'd had the car for a little while, needed a tune-up, which on these special cars is a very big, expensive operation. It's really a race car, and a tune-up can cost as much as an ordinary new car. I went home without picking up my car. I could have cut that out for your benefit, but no, I'm not gonna do that, folks. I suffer, you suffer. Eddie Van Halen drove a Lamborghini, a Countach. If you don't know the Countach, I won't tell you how to spell it and look it up. Just think of a Lamborghini in your head, and that's the model you're thinking of. That's the one. That's, if you're my age, it's the model from Transformers. I think it was Sunstreak or Sunstreaker. If you're Always Sunny in Philadelphia fan, you know what the Countach looks like from that very violent Christmas episode from many years ago. Eddie Van Halen drove a Lamborghini, a Countach, and Claudio. Oh, I need to hit the button. Oh, I gotta borrow the. Oh, sorry guys, I'm on archive.org and I want to borrow the book, and it's not letting me now. Hang on, gotta find another link.
And we're Seafood Mama. Our show tonight is being brought to you as a stereo simulcast on KOIN TV, Channel 6, and KQFM 100 on your radio dial. So tune them both in and sit back and enjoy.
Thank you, Seafood Mama. Thank you for that quick announcement. All right. While looking for other sources of Sammy's autobiography, because I'm not going to drive the quarter mile away from my home to do the half price books and spend probably $9 on a used copy of this little stinker. Although I will have to say, when the book came out, I heard a great interview with Sammy, and it seemed fascinating. It was on a podcast. I only listened to like 3 or 4 podcasts at the time, so it might have been something like The Nerdist. Not that he's a nerdy guy, but it was a pretty big vehicle for its time for all kinds of mainstream pop culture, not just, really nerdy geeky stuff. But while I was looking for other sources, digital sources, I did see a headline in Reddit says fact checking Sammy Hagar's book. And there's an image. It's posted 3 months ago, and I don't know. There's just an image of someone's writing, and it doesn't have a link to what the what the source is, but it says, I'm a longtime fan of both VH singers and longtime commenter at VHND. Maybe that's some sort of a message board or forum or something. I thought I knew Sammy before this book came out, but I simply cannot believe how much he lies in this book. Is he lying about Eddie? I don't know because I wasn't there. Okay, well, that's where you could stop. All the lies I spotted are lies that any knowledgeable fan could spot. He is shamelessly rewriting history. I have numbered the lies I spotted below. This is like some of the political YouTube channels I follow that I really, really hate their thumbnails and clickbait titles, but they're covering a lot of good information. I hate their editorializing, but they're doing more work than other people are doing for certain political real-world developments that I want to be on top of, things that are changing on a daily basis. And I'm like, okay, I just hate the way they frame things, but I'm there for the information. That's kind of what this guy does. I mean, I don't need to hear you like, is he lying about Eddie? I can't believe what a crazy liar he is. But I have numbered the lies I spotted below, and there's only 3 in this little clip of an image. So I assume he's got more than 3. Because it's like page 54, page 78, page 80. Quote, the first Montrose album has sold more than 4 million records over the years. According to the RIAA, he says now, it's certified just 1 million. Worldwide sales are barely more than USA sales for all Hagar's albums. Number 2, page 78, I sold out the Oakland Coliseum that 4th of July, 1980. He fails to mention that he was on a bill with 4 other bands, 3 of which were hugely popular at the time. Blue Oyster Cult, REO Speedwagon, and Triumph, and also Randy Hansen. Okay, I don't know if Randy Hansen's going to be a contributing factor there. I think he benefited more than anybody. He's a local legend up here in Seattle. If that's the same Randy Hansen, he's talking about the Jimi Hendrix Tribute Act. Hagar conveniently implies he sold it out by himself. I think that's fair. That's fair to call him out on. Page 80 in 1982, we went out on tour, headlining arenas double nights in a lot of places. And the guy says, for my years working in concert promotion at Electric Factory in Philly in the 80s, a huge concert promoter back then, I have the list of Sammy's 82 tour dates straight from Polestar. There was only one city listed where he played twice, San Francisco. Again, he is lying through his fake teeth. I like that extra dig in there. I'm going to try a quoted search for, again, he is lying through his fake teeth, and see if I can find the source of this. Q&A with Sammy Hagar autobiography author Joel Selvin. Ooh. Oh, here it is, vhlinks.com, fact-checking Sam's book. All right, we're going to get dirty, folks. Sammy Hagar calls Eddie Van Halen a liar. Anyways, back to the reactions in Reddit to this post. People are just making some quick jokes, and someone's like, let it go. This is unhealthy. Enjoy what we have regardless of who sang for the band. It's funny how nobody ever points out how much Eddie twisted the truth or flat out lied. We conveniently forget what a piece of garbage he was when he was at the height of his using days. I believe if Mike Anthony ever decided to get greedy and let shit off his chest and write book or give a 100% honest view of how things really happened, we would probably be heartbroken. Thank goodness he's not built like that. And then someone responds, we got Noel Monk's version instead. Same thing. Someone says, Sammy definitely knows how to punch up a story, but in fairness, I wouldn't put my faith in the RIAA's numbers as the final word. Because RIAA doesn't automatically certify every album, and the band or label has to pay them to do the audit. Hell, Dark Side of the Moon has averaged 10,000 sales a week since it was last certified 25 years ago, so there's a lot of disparity in the certified numbers versus actual numbers. All right, I won't read any more than that. It's just people having opinions and stuff. Let me see if oh yeah, here's the full version. Q&A with autobiography author Joel Selvin. Wow. I mean, if that's Joel, I don't understand why would Joel crap on the book that he helped biographize? Let me see. I've got looks like a digital copy that's working out here on my computer, but I need to pinpoint the spot where I left off, but I'm looking at a couple other things. Page 90 contains one incredible paragraph that is the biggest pile of BS I've ever read relating to Van Halen in my life. Yeah, I don't believe this is... How is this... Oh, a guy named Adam posted some notes from his take on the book. I have not read the book, but I think I'll go buy it now and do the research myself. Here's Adam's post. So that's not Joel Sullivan. Okay. View full version. Aren't you guys glad you're going on this journey with me in real time? Anyway, back to his fact-checking. Page 90 contains... Okay, here we go. Here's the quote from the page. The tour for VOA was my most successful. I sold out arenas everywhere, 2, 3, 4 nights in some places. One of the top grossing tours in 1984. Right up there with Van Halen, who broke at the same time with Jump and all that. I remember getting an award in Portland, Oregon. I sold out 2 nights and got the show of the year. Van Halen was runner-up. We were neck and neck on that road. My album was 1.6 million. They ended up selling 10 million records. So his commentary is, Van Halen broke with Jump in 1984? How he belittles Van Halen's earlier success. I was under the impression that they broke in 1978 when they exploded with their earth-shattering debut, rewriting the rules for rock music and sold 2 million copies right out of the gate. Ed was winning every Guitar Player award in sight. It was their first year. VH far eclipsed everything Montrose and Hagar ever did. Everyone was talking about VH in 78, and no one was talking about Hagar or Montrose. Then he takes issue with the sold-out arenas everywhere, 2, 3, 4 nights in some places. Top grossing tours in 84, right up there with Van Halen. Wow. With this statement, Hagar completely abandons any mindset of the truth is sacred. He is shamelessly rewriting history here. Van Halen was the monster that was selling out multiple arenas, not him. Hagar couldn't even play most cities on the East Coast because he simply wasn't popular over there. Hagar could sell out arenas in the Midwest and in California, and that's practically it. His VOA tour was his biggest tour ever, yet he played one night in each city except for places where he was big, such as St. Louis, Dallas, and San Fran, where he played 2 nights. See, this level of detail in the criticism is kind of what makes me likely to give it some credence here. I'm glad he's not just dismissing it out of hand, and he's also not I don't know. He's not painting it with a broad brush and saying he's lying because he sucks and he wasn't selling any records. He's like, no, it sounds like he's giving him his due. He's just pointing out that it's a huge overinflation of what kind of success he was having before Van Halen. And Sammy is trying to present himself as someone who was sort of toe-to-toe success-wise, with the guys in Van Halen at that point in both of their career. Like, oh, they were on top and I was on top, and that's why it was a good time to get together maybe. That's me sort of taking that as his implication of his success and what it meant. He was playing one night, not 2 to 4, and overall he played smaller venues than where Van Halen was booked and sold far less tickets in those venues. The Van Halen tour was a 100% sellout virtually everywhere, and on the other hand, Hagar had plenty of cities where he could only sell 30 to 50% of the tickets, even after I Can't Drive 55. The quote about him and Van Halen being neck and neck on the road. On what planet? Anyone who was alive during the 80s knows that Van Halen was infinitely more popular than Hagar. Perhaps Hagar was the only person on Earth who didn't see it that way. In 84, Van Halen was through the stratosphere. Their tour absolutely dwarfed all other rock bands' tours, especially Hagar's. Quote, I remember getting an award in Portland, Oregon. I sold out 2 nights and got show of the year. Again, from my years working in concert promotion, I have here Sammy's 1982 tour dates. He played 1 night in Portland on the 19th of March, 82 at Memorial Coliseum. The dates before and after were both in Washington. No other Portland dates. Any fan who reads, okay, here's a quote. Before I joined the band, Van Halen didn't have a particularly tight show. Roth would talk. They'd do another song. Ed would play a 20-minute guitar solo. They would do another song. Roth would talk some more, another song. Al would do a drum solo for 30 minutes. On the 1984 tour, they were doing 8 songs in a 2-hour show. They ended every song the same way. His response is, any fan who reads this, who either saw Van Halen before Sammy joined or owns any amount of old Van Halen bootlegs, knows that every single thing Sammy said in that paragraph is complete BS. EVH's solo was always around 10 minutes. Alex's was always 3 to 4 minutes. They always did 16 songs, not counting solos. VH was a well-oiled machine, a stellar production, and tightly choreographed. The exact opposite of what Sam describes. Again, he is shamelessly rewriting history to try to diminish what Van Halen was before he joined. There's more. And if you want to find it, you look up Fact Checking Sam's Book on vhlinks.com or Google or any of the, Q&A with Sammy Hagar, autobiographer, Joel Selvin. Interesting comments. I'm going to check on this. Okay, this is an article on vhnd.com from April 26, 2011. I will save this. Oh, no, it's short. It's really short. Hang on. Sorry, everybody. That's just barely more than a blurb. Examiner.com conducted a rare interview with Joel Selvin, the author of Sammy Hagar's best-selling autobiography, Read My Uncensored Life in Rock. Excerpts are below. Okay, so it's just little snippets. There's a question about the sales numbers and that he sold more records with Van Halen than David Lee Roth did, and the interviewer is questioning these very specific numbers that they bring up in the text. I'm not going to read it; it's boring. But he says, "I'm not informed on the sales issues, so that's all pointless." Have you read David Lee Roth's book? Did that play any part in how you did or didn't want to approach telling Sammy's story? He says, I read them all, but Sammy isn't very interested in David Lee. I referred to a Van Halen biography. Everybody wants some from time to time. That's our boy, Ian Christie. Woo! That I'm leaning on a lot. That's the book. They ask about Dave's strengths and weaknesses as a member of Van Halen and Sammy's. No comment on Dave. No knowledge. Sammy obviously drove that band to some very fine musical and commercial peaks. Can't argue with that. Even in the book, it's still unclear as to whether Sammy was fired from Van Halen or left on his own accord in '96. What's the truth? Funny word, truth. Sammy has his story. The Van Halens have theirs. Nobody seems to have the whole story. Ever seen Rashomon? Sammy also reveals a keen mind for business, opening celebrated bicycle shops, travel agency, and of course his south-of-the-border themed tequila brand and restaurants. Do you think Jimmy Buffett had more of an influence on him with the latter two than Sammy lets on in the book? Do you know if he's ever heard from Buffett about this? He says, Jimmy Buffett wishes he'd thought of the tequila first. So it's a response to this that launches on this comment thread from 12 years ago that has the step-by-step breakdown of all Sammy's supposed lies. There's another comment in this thread from someone named Roth Leaps 83, so you can tell what side he's on. I'm not impressed with this weasel. Of course, he has to give very short, ambiguous answers to these probing questions because he'd otherwise expose Hagar as a total fraud that we know he is, especially when it comes to Van Hagar album sales and stealing Jimmy Buffett's beach bum persona and business ideas. Thank goodness this whole book thing is finally going away. I can only take so much publicity about fictitious album sales, tequila salesmen boasting, and dreams about aliens and downloading lyrics using Wi-Fi. Let's get VHND back to talking about important stuff like a new Roth Van Halen album and tour that's going to kick all of our asses. That was 12 years ago. All right. Let me take a break. And by break, I mean I'm going to give your ears a break for a second.
But in the movies, in the early mid '80s wacky teen movies, it's just ooh, he got what it was coming to him. Doesn't he look silly now? He's just gonna take that and then go, oh, darn it! Why is my life crappy now? I sure am paying for being a bad guy now. I just there's a line with the Cameron Crowe stuff that I always have a problem with. It's like some of it's comedic, usually not in an over the top way though. Some characters can be over the top. But there's never, to me, there's never been, maybe I just didn't grow up enough and watch like the other stuff he did, like Jerry Maguire or whatever. But the 80s and some of the 90s stuff, to me, it's just, the tone is off. It wants you to be very emotionally involved and invested in what's going on in these people's lives and sort of take it on. And then but then it wants you to laugh at silly things that people do or situations that are a bit wacky. Obviously, I mean, Almost Famous is out of that, way out of that league. Almost Famous is a fantastic blend, totally, of all the emotional stuff and a very genuine kind of humor that kind of pokes through. All right.
Show starts in 7 minutes.
Okay, please watch this video. It could be considered an important stone in the reputable men.
Thanks, Jerry.
Now I'm ready.
Okay. Oh yeah, the perfect 10.
And I can just look it up on my phone.
Oh yeah, that's what I was gonna do anyway. So we can
So
do that.
if you don't mind keeping track of how many I've said.
Yes, in fact I will make a list of them. Let me start my list here. J, top 10. Here we go.
Okay.
Get a swig of my beer before you start talking. Okay. I was being very quiet every time I would sip. I would be like, just take a little sip. This is the fun part. This is the part that reminds me of like that metal show.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. Like eventually I want to do a panel. You know, like in a bigger space. Like when we do this again for something else, it'd be fun to have like 4 of you, like just like at the metal show. You know, and like have a little board, have a chick come up there and
Yes.
you know, a chick, whatever. That's like sexist, right? Whatever.
I don't know if it is or not. I don't think it is for us.
Right. Have a girl in a bikini, like turn the letters or put up the cards. You know.
Yes, exactly.
I love that show. I miss that metal show.
All right, where's the track list? Studio, genre, label, producer, singles, background, track listing. There we go. Okay. All right, ready?
Ready.
Okay, if I get to the end of these 3 and I don't have 10, I'm going to be very annoyed because I left my list at home. So, let's see. Is it... Yes, Could This Be Magic is the cool slide guitar one that blew my mind today, so I want to keep that. That's on there. Loss of Control is going to be on the list because it's insane and it's so aggressive. So that's 2. I have to have Everybody Wants Some, and I have to have And the Cradle Will Rock. I think And the Cradle Will Rock is a very nice parallel to Running with the Devil. It's the opening track on the album. It's a little slower and more sinister, you know, but it has the cheekiness that Running with the Devil didn't quite have. Of that, his folks are overjoyed, you know, those little throwaway lines like that little, I don't know, David Lee Roth-ishness. So that's 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let me go to Van Halen to You. Then I don't think I've got too many on this one. I definitely want Beautiful Girls on there because it's so fun. I also want Dance the Night Away because that's really fun. Both of those two are those are the real high spots as far as catchiness goes and sing-alongable courses. Dance the Night Away apparently was inspired by a woman that was during one of their shows went out to have sex with her boyfriend, and the band was in the parking lot, could see it happen, and then came back in when the band got to finish their break, and then danced the whole rest of the night with her pants on inside out and didn't realize. The story I read said backwards, but I'm like, that's impossible. You would know your pants are on backwards if the zipper's back here.
Yeah.
I assume they were on inside out. So that was where Dance the Night Away came from.
That's great.
So that's what we're up to 6.
Yep.
Maybe I might be missing out on. I thought I had a 3rd one. It might have been Light Up the Sky. I'm gonna bail. I'm gonna go to Van Halen 1. So I've got 4 slots left. Is that correct?
Correct.
I'm gonna go. Oh, Little Dreamer. Little Dreamer is.
Sorry.
No.
I need to
Say
shut
it.
up, but that's probably my favorite Van Halen song. And
Really?
Beautiful Girls, yeah, but Little Dreamer. Just those notes. When I hear that, I'm just like, oh, I gotta turn it on.
It's such a great example of Eddie being languid and understated and holding your attention still, and that's the stuff. It's I don't hear a lot of exciting instrumental guitarists. He's not an instrumentalist necessarily, but he, you know what I mean. Comes to high energy, instrumentally oriented rock, lead guitar oriented rock, every now and then, like George Lynch does that on something like "It's All I Want" from the first Lynch Mob album. A little greasier and understated and stuff, and then I think I can learn it because it sounds simple, and then I go try to figure it out and realize, oh, you son of a bitch, you played this in the key of F. It's to be a dick to me instead of something open. God damn it. Or is that for C? It's one of those two. And it's way harder than I thought it was. An aside that doesn't go anywhere. Then we got to go. So Little Dreamer, so I got 3 spots left. I really, really, really want Ain't Talking About Love on there. Because it's like 2 chords. And it's meant to be an exercise in simplicity. And Eddie still makes it complicated in a nice way. In a very pleasing to the ears way. Not like, not like some of the other ones that are complicated in like an assault on your senses, which is fun when Van Halen does it. Not, as I said, when certain other bands do it. But then I've got to have... Oof. That's tough. Because we're down... I know what number 1 is. So I'm not doing these in any order except for number 1. So I'm not... This is not...
Sorry.
This is not by... Yeah. Oh, we forgot to clap when we started this, too.
It was a bug. It was...
I think I have to go with Eruption just because it's a guitar milestone.
Nice.
If we're gonna include Eruption as a song, it has to be a perfect 10. So that leaves me with 1 song left, and that is I'm the One.
Of course.
I'm the One to me is a perfect Van Halen song. It has Alex, as you alluded to earlier, doing Alex to the utmost. It's his swing and his groove is so involved and fun, and Eddie's riffs are all there. The really hypercharged picking in the rhythms is there. The energetic approach to the verses where Dave's got to be really bouncy. And Steven Tyler would kind of make a bit of a... Steven Tyler was already Steven Tyler at this point, but I think of like later Aerosmith. And I don't think of Steven Tyler doing early Aerosmith stuff like he used to. I think I'm doing more of that monotonous, in a good way, David Lee Roth kind of, with some of his jivier tunes. But anyway, could be parallel thinking. Could be he could have been inspired by it. I could be way off base. But then it's like super hyperactive, and it goes into the show your love, the harmonies, the sing-alongable part for that chorus. And even if it had those things, it wouldn't be a perfect Van Halen song if it didn't have a stop in the middle with a harmonized vocal doo-wop breakdown, shooby-doo-wah, for Dave to break all that tension and that momentum, and then band comes back in, build back up to show you, wow, 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 all kinds of screaming and just putting it all together for the ending. It is a perfect Van Halen song. It might not be everyone's perfect Van Halen song, but to me, it's just got everything great about this lineup of the band doing what they do best, all in like a short, catchy song. Magic.
Perfect. I agree. That is one of my favorite, and that has only become one of my favorite songs in like the past year as I've been soaking in Van Halen. Like I told you, I wasn't always a huge fan. Of course I loved Van Halen songs, but I never really listened. And, as I started to study, I literally been studying Van Halen.
Right.
Because, when I told Tony, like, oh yeah, I'm not that big of a Van Halen fan. Tony, he just looks at me like, okay, honey. You yeah, then the Maureen voice, oh honey, you have to hear this. But
all right, verified. Yep, this is still recording.
Yep.
This is still good. Oh, and it's giving us the blinky battery light.
Well,
so
look at that.
Good thing I fucking shut up finally.
And on that note, I caught that last. Shut up finally.
Perfect. Thanks again to Eve Clarke for that whole interview and the opportunity to do a perfect 10 Van Halen lineup for myself. There's a little bit of funkiness, some popping audio-wise. Technical stuff, it's in the track, couldn't get it out. I'm sure you're no worse for the wear. because you finally got to hear a nice lady's voice on the podcast for the first time in a little while, since you heard Kim doing her poetry recitation a month or two ago. And you got to hear me, not edited. Isn't that nice? Hearing me in hyperactive conversation. That's me at middle of the day on a weekend, totally sober and not considering my words too overly much or editing myself. Now to rejoin my Sammy narrative that I recorded months ago before I got distracted by white zombie episodes and poetry episodes. Now, I am going to get back into Sammy's account of the whole meeting with Eddie Van Halen, but I do want to touch on a couple more criticisms of his narrative from this guy as it relates to certain numbers again, and whether or not we trust RIAA numbers or the records that are out there. Hey, it's all we've got to go on, really. So I'm just going to cover a couple more objections, and we'll get back to Sammy's telling of his first meeting with Eddie. But right now,
oh shit, this is where the DeCarlo dick down begins.
Goddamn right, Max. Thank you for that. It says, page 173, the fans went against Roth. He died a quick death as a solo artist when he went solo in 1985. And this guy goes, I would say that most current VH fans are under the impression that Hagar's solo career had been more successful than Roth's. However, if you want to measure the success with album sales, Roth's solo career has actually been more successful than Hagar's. Roth's first 3 albums went platinum. Crazy from the Heat in 85, Eat 'Em and Smile in 86, and Skyscraper in 87. Hagar, however, never could match that success. He never had 3 consecutive platinum solo albums, just 3 consecutive gold albums. And then later in 87 released another one that only went gold with the help of Eddie playing bass. Hagar's solo career simply was never as big as Roth's was in the 80s. Roth was consistently platinum while Hagar was consistently gold. Page 222. When Irving Azoff told Hagar that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame wanted to induct Van Halen, but only the Roth version of the band, Hagar says, I went nuts on Irving. I was in the band longer than Roth. He was in Van Halen 7 years. I was with them 11 years. I sold more records than he did. How could they do that to me? He is wrong on both counts. Roth was in Van Halen for 12 years, 74 to 85. And VH sold twice as many albums with Roth than with Hagar. See RIAA.com. Page 234, Sammy says that before he joined VH, I was selling out multiple arenas, had 5 platinum albums in a row on Geffen, and I was ripe to join Van Halen when they asked. I already went over the multiple arenas bull. As for 5 platinum albums in a row on Geffen, he had only 3 Geffen albums and none were platinum. Standing Hampton, gold as of 85. 3 Lock Box, gold to this day. VOA, gold as of mid-85. Now, unlike a lot of other people that just hate Sammy's guts, I think the guy makes some good points. I'm not reading you all his other editorializing and stuff, but if it's not clear, or if I haven't made my bias with Sammy clear, I really love a few of the things that he did with Van Halen in his time there. I don't dig his solo career. I don't dig Montrose all that much. Talented folks though they are, especially Ronnie, of course, he's a guitar hero. I just always, I never get anything out of Sammy's lyrics. I think he did a short-lived band with like one of my favorite guitarists of all time, Billy Duffy from The Cult, and I think Matt Sorum was playing drums and Michael Anthony was playing bass, and they put out a video maybe 8-10 years ago, and it's just like typical older guy ideas of what hard rock is supposed to sort of sound like for people that want a modernized throwback to it. You know, it was like Chickenfoot, but without all the virtuosity from Joe Satriani. It was just, we're going to do stuff. We're going to rock it. We're going to go out on the town, and we're going to take no prisoners, and I'm not even directly quoting. These are just my impressions of the way he writes. It's going to be wild and crazy. These are going to be wild and crazy times. Going to imply a good time with my lady, having sex probably. no other night's going to be like this one, and we're going to hit it hard. I mean, there's a lot of like really basic platitudes and similes, and he's not bringing a lot to the plate when it comes to lyrics, but better singer than Roth. And I think if I don't know, I think if Eddie was easier to get along with, they could have had a more harmonious relationship. But what are you gonna do, man? It's Van Halen. Eddie wants what Eddie wants. So back to the Red Rocker, or Red, My Uncensored Life in Rock, the 5150 chapter 7, where we left off. The Lamborghini. Eddie sees. Okay, so Eddie's at the Lamborghini place. He's talking to Claudio, and he asks him, "Hey, man, nice car. Who is it?" "Sammy Hagar," said Claudio. "You should call him and get him in the band." Okay, it just happened like that. That's, by all accounts, yeah, they were introduced through this Lamborghini / Ferrari / whatever European supercar mechanic that they shared. Everybody knew that Dave had left Van Halen a couple of months earlier, quit the band as soon as his little solo single, Just a Gigolo, started to do something. It was too soon to say they were floundering, but their predicament was public knowledge. You got his number? I mean, that's that's his version of events he wasn't involved in, I guess. You got his number, Eddie said. At my house, the phone rang. It was Eddie Van Halen. "Hey, man, what are you doing?" he said. "I just came off tour and I'm kind of nursing my foot," I said. "Would you like to get together, come down and jam," he said, "and maybe join Van Halen?" "Not really," I said. "I'm burnt. I'd love to meet you, but..." I'd only met Eddie briefly a couple of times. We'd done a couple of big festivals together, and he'd come to my dressing room. "I'm such a big Montrose fan," he had said. "What a nice guy," I thought. "So humble and sweet." When you shook his hand, he was always holding yours with both his hands and adding in a little bow. "How about tomorrow?" he said. "No, man, I can't." I said, "I'm burnt. A couple of days at least. Let me call you back." We exchanged numbers and hung up. I mean, all right, so you get Eddie just like, "Hey, join my band, please. I'm so desperate," because as everyone knows, we're floundering. But even though Sammy doesn't say that they're really floundering, but he implies it. We exchanged numbers and hung up. I started thinking, maybe if they're broken up, I could get Eddie in my band. I could use a gunslinger like him. Or maybe I'd just write some songs with him and get him to play on my next record. I was a big fan. But I hated Dave. The guy rubbed me wrong. I'm sure I rub all kinds of people wrong, so it's not like I'm putting him down. The guy was a great frontman, great attitude in rock, and had an image from hell, but I just couldn't stand the guy. He was the opposite of what I believed in and what I am. First of all, the guy's not a great singer, and he acts like he's the coolest, hottest guy in the world. When to me, he looks gay. The guy was never believable to me. Right, so I'm not shitting on anybody of a certain age for using that word negatively. I'm a fan of too many cranky rock and metal guys that use that word as a put down. I think it sucks, but it is what it is when you're from their generations. But it is, I think it's a little much to say I'm everything that Dave is not. Dave's everything I'm not, because I'm good and he's bad. But I'm not putting him down. I love that. I like that he admits he probably rubs all kinds of people wrong. But yeah, I'm not putting him down. And then here's what he has going for him. And here's why I feel like I can take that away from him, because I'm putting him down, calling him kind of a fraud. The call didn't come as a complete surprise. Ted Templeman had been the one to tell me that Roth had split a few months earlier. And at the time, I told Betsy, "They're going to call me. You watch. Who else are they going to get?" There was Ozzy Osbourne, Ronnie James Dio, and me. Ooh, was there, Sammy? You don't think that there was anybody else out there? Come on. When Eddie did call, I was sitting there with goosebumps on my arm. I went down to see him a couple of days later. I walked into their place in Studio City. Alex Van Halen took one look at my short hair and started laughing. You look like somebody put a donut on your head and cut it off," he said. I had the sides shaved and left a little bit on top. I was taking a year off. Alex was drunk on his ass. He was drinking a case of tall malt liquor cans a day. He pounded them too. He could shotgun like nobody. He always wanted to have contests. He would pass out a couple of times a day, wake up and shotgun 2 or 3 beers, crack one more, and then walk out of the room. Eddie drank all day, too. They both woke up, grabbed a beer, lit a cigarette, and that was the way they started their day. Midday, around 4 o'clock, they would take a nap. They were both big nap heads. Eddie lived in a very humble house with his wife, Valerie Bertinelli, the actress. It was actually Valerie's house. Eddie just moved in with her. She also had another place, a sort of beach house in Malibu, and they split their time between her 2 homes. The main one, though, was up in the hills off Coldwater Canyon. It was just an ordinary 2-bedroom house with a garage he'd converted into a studio. They called the studio 5150 after the police code for picking up a crazy person. It was not a rock star home, and the studio was a dump. They were recording through a homemade board that could have come out of a Cracker Jack box, built by engineer Don Landy. Landy could make the board sound brilliant, but he was a genius and knew how to work it. To anybody else, it was like model airplane gear. The studio was filthy. Beer cans everywhere, ashtrays full of cigarettes. Don Landy had to blow away the cigarette ashes just to plug something into the board. The place smelled like the worst bar on the planet. I don't think it had ever been cleaned. Eddie's guitars were lying on the floor. Nothing on racks, nothing in cases, just on the floor, on chairs, leaning against amps, against the wall, a pile of them in the corner. It was beautiful, but I'd never seen anything like it. Eddie walked in wearing a pair of those shades with louvers in them. Louvers. He'd been up all night drinking, trying to write some music. I didn't know these guys. I didn't know what their routine was, but they were beat up. Eddie was wearing a pair of wrinkled pants. When I went into their house later that day, I saw why. He and Valerie were living out of their suitcases. They had been off the road for a few months, but they didn't have their stuff hanging in their closets. It was sitting in their suitcases on the floor. There were piles of stuff everywhere. It was weird. They could afford maids, but they didn't have them. They were kids. If you really look at it, they had been out on the road for 5 years and had only recently come home. Now, I want to jump over to the narrative from good old Ian Christie from Everybody Wants Some, the Van Halen saga, about this time period. He says that when Sammy met with Eddie and Alex, they tried out some ideas for Summer Nights, one of the new songs they had already rehearsed with Roth. Engineer Don Landy was on hand during the first jam sessions and happily gave Hagar 2 thumbs up. After a few hours in the 5150, the new band embraced one another. Van Halen name would carry on. Hagar had previously crossed paths with Van Halen several times. His early albums with Montrose were the testing ground for the production techniques of Ted Templeman and Landy, the team responsible for the last 6 Van Halen albums. The Hagar-penned Make It Last from the first Montrose album had been part of their set as a cover band in 1974. Van Halen toured with Montrose, though only after Hagar's departure. Hagar was in the process of reconfiguring his solo act when Van Halen called. The 37-year-old singer had recently ventured into the economy wattage supergroup HSAS, with session guitarist Neil Schon of Journey, drummer Michael Shreve of Santana, and bassist Kenny Aronson of Foghat. During his lengthy career, Hagar had made a lot of friends, not just among musicians, but among A&R reps, tour managers, and promotion men who kept the music business in action. My only saving grace replacing a guy like Roth, Sammy said, is that people know who I am. Now, from this point, there's a few pages of backstory on Sammy, his childhood, his upbringing, his other musical experiences, and blah, 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 blah. He rocked without much rage. He was energetic, but not usually angry or snotty. Yet his competitive approach to music continued. Question my talent and I'll probably kill you, he told Hit Parader. I've seen every group in this business play live, and I can honestly say that I put out more in concert than any other performer. I would say I'm in the top 3 in the world in terms of performing. He notes how much he liked to talk on stage and how legendary his stage raps ended up becoming. One audience address in the early 80s reportedly clocked in at 27 minutes, telling jokes, trying on clothes, and shooting off down-home political opinions. He was an animated young presence on the meat and potatoes rock circuit. He understood the regional nature of touring in the 70s and eventually played the Down and Dirty annual Texas Jam at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas and the Astrodome in Houston more than anyone. Maybe that's where his sort of is very confident bragging about, the arenas he was selling out compared to Van Halen comes from. He married his sweetheart early in his career, Betsy. His lyrics were simple but honest. He shunned temptations of the road but offered a steady stream of blunt songs about sex. He described his own vocabulary as pretty bad, depending on the ear of the beholder. Songs like Dick in the Dirt would either speak straight to the heart or fall flat in empty cliches. He frequently cited I Can't Drive 55 as his best experience putting rhymes together. He was also a successful songwriter. Keep on Rockin' by Bette Midler, I guess. In the Rose from 1979 was his. Oh, you son of a bitch. You made me so miserable. If you haven't heard my episodes on Janis Joplin, feel free to go check those out. They took a lot out of me. I was in misery watching that fucking movie. Bette Midler's amazing. And she's, just a wonderful performer, of course. She won me over in that film. I never really cared too much for her. I didn't have to really think about it. But boy, I hated the songs. I hated the songs on that movie. God, those lyrics are dumb. But I didn't know Sammy had a part in that, or if I did, I've forgotten. It's been a couple years. Because a lot of those songs were written and arranged by the guy that produced most of the Doors albums, like the first 4 Doors albums, I think, if I remember correctly. He's down to earth about a lot of things, he says. Also he wrote a song for Rick Springfield in 1981 that became a top 10 single called "I've Done Everything for You." He notes there is a loose screw Californian side to this down-home kind of guy. In 1968 in Fontana, he claimed to have experienced the first of several visitations by space aliens. Anyone who thinks we're the only ones here, despite the vastness of the entire universe, is fucking crazy, he told the Guitar World. That's a pretty defensible position, and I think we all kind of feel that way. That it's like the argument about atheism. It's like, well, if you don't believe that there's, if you don't believe that there's any kind of God, then you're just full of yourself and you think you know it all and you think you know how the universe came to be. No, it's just that a lot of us don't feel that the proof is there to sufficiently change the way we behave every day. We have morals in spite of the religious writings and teachings that we have read, not because of them. The space alien thing is like, no, it's not that we don't believe it's possible, like God. It's not that I don't believe God's possible. I can't conceive of it, and it's not self-evident. It's not that we don't believe it's possible there's space aliens. It's just that, there should be more proof by now. If we've been visited as often as everyone says they've been visited, wants us to believe, not saying it's not happening. It's just fine, whatever. It's not gonna change what time I get up every day. It's not gonna change what I do tonight. Let's put it that way. But that's what people do. They reduce, there's a very single-minded attempt to sort of reduce an opposing argument to their belief to something much more extreme than it actually is. Anyway, he says, I'm a firm believer. When I was 19 or 20, they downloaded everything that was in my head. I don't know who the fuck they are, but I've narrowed them down to a people called the Nine, who are called that because they're from the ninth dimension. He named his music publishing company Nine Music after the space invaders he claimed were watching over him. So in 81, he leaves Capitol Records and he signs with David Geffen. He joins a reliable league of rockers called like Billy Squier, Aldo Nova, and the Greg Kinn Band, and Quarter Flash. Hey, Seafood Mama. Acts that seemed sensible compared to the outrages of heavy metal and the decadent alienation of new wave. FM radio was a business, not a social revolution, and it needed to rock steady to keep its advertisers happy. For guys like Hagar, who could deliver tracks like Rock and Roll Weekend, there was plenty of money to be made. This is why I love writers like Ian Christie. These are the guys that put everything in perspective and in context and don't overly editorialize. You see his point of view peek out in his writing, and I think that's a healthy thing in his case. Let's see. Solo Success comes along, and this brings Cars. There's a list of Cars. Eddie Van Halen frequently admitted to coming up with riffs while diddling with a guitar in front of the TV. Hagar got his inspiration while alone behind the wheel. I always drive like a complete asshole, he said. Cut people off, tailgate, you name it. So when he gets to Van Halen, he has an impressive 3 gold albums under his belt. There we go again, not platinum. We've talked about those numbers and those titles. And 1985 was the last one. The Ted Templeman produced VOA, a patriotic potshot against the Soviet Union for boycotting the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles. the Red Rocker was anything but a commie. The VOA album cover pictured Uncle Sam Hagar parachuting onto the White House lawn to help Ronald Reagan manage the constant nuisance of foreign powers. People magazine recommended the album to rock fans who don't demand a whole lot of subtlety. Who gives a shit that the Soviets aren't taking part in the 84 Olympics? Why was that a slight against anyone? That's like, hey, if you don't want to come to the party, good. Who's pissed off about that? Jesus Christ. I mean, maybe there's financial reasons. I'm obviously not well versed in mid-80s geopolitics, but come on. Making an album cover in reaction to that, or possibly songs in reaction to that is, that's rough. I'm glad I listened to the Misfits instead when it comes to shit like that. Sammy was a rebel who obeyed the rules and flourished. Where many rock musicians detested the music business, he created cameos in several music videos for his A&R man at Geffen, the celebrated rock swami John Kolodner. A soon to have much video success. Aerosmith was taking note at the time, I'm sure. By 85, he was an utterly commercial creature who remained deeply convinced of his own integrity. Following the news of Sammy joining Van Halen, VOA went platinum. So there we go. There's the platinum record. It's kind of like Stephen King, when he announced that he was writing books under a pen name, Richard Bachman. The Richard Bachman book sales went through the roof, although they were already doing fine on their own. That's a whole other thing. If you want to check out my YouTube page, the link's in the description, and I have a review up, hopefully, by the time this comes out, of me talking about the book The Running Man by Richard Bachman / Stephen King. It went a bit long, and I have to edit it and put some stupid graphics in there or something soon. Not sure when this is coming out, meaning this Van Halen episode. I got a lot to jump into to collect here. Let's see. He says, if I wasn't so dedicated to being true to myself, I could have been a platinum-selling artist 5 years ago, he declared to Hit Parader. The book then goes into a bit about how, millions of dollars are at stake with the money that Geffen Records has invested in Sammy Hagar. So they're ready to go to they're ready to go through a protracted legal battle with Warner Brothers, who's obviously Van Halen's record label. So Sammy owes Geffen 3 more records, and he's announcing he's jumping ship and signing up with the guys in Van Halen. Eddie, Alex, and Mike make a joke, I guess, publicly that they would tour with Sammy Hagar as a solo act as with Hagar as his backing act. Oh yeah. The joke pleased their label Warner Brothers none. Several hundred hours of negotiation later, Geffen accepted the promise of one more solo album from Hagar, along with a cut of the proceeds from the next Van Halen album. So that's the one that Eddie plays bass on in 1987. Now at Farm Aid 1985, a big annual benefit created by Willie Nelson, I believe, and usually featuring, in the 80s, it would always feature like John Mellencamp and, Ted Nugent, and I think Ted Nugent had to have played Farm Aid, right? Anyway, there's some country acts and some mainstream, adult contemporary rock type music acts, and obviously Willie Nelson. Metallica did an acoustic show for Farm Aid at least one year. Now it says Eddie appeared on stage with Sammy's band in September 85 at the first annual Farm Aid charity concert for American farmers. Organized by Willie Nelson and John Cougar Mellencamp as a homegrown response to the Live Aid relief effort for Africa earlier that year, Farm Aid raised millions. Doing their part, Eddie and Hagar romped through Led Zeppelin's Rock and Roll, with Sammy all over the stage in yellow shoes and his headset microphone. Eddie tore up a guitar solo on a Frankenstrat. Their rendition of Wild Thing was cut from the Nashville Network broadcast after Hagar started joking about his dick. But after Eddie's solo, Sammy announced the big news to the throng, that he was the new lead singer of Van Halen. This footage is available if you want to look it up on YouTube. It's interesting. It's a little uncomfortable at times to watch for me, but it's not my thing. What can I say? The young people might call it cringe at points. because everything is either cringe or based, right? I don't know. They don't even probably say that anymore. Yeah. There's a quote from Alex about this era, or a public sort of quote about the transition, and he says, "We had a toothache for about 11 years," Alex said about Roth, "and we finally went to the dentist and had it extracted and got a crown with a gold cap." Michael Anthony would talk about how he would dread going to photo sessions with Roth because I worried about how he would think I looked when I got there. I know Edward and Alex felt the same way because Roth's saying, "You got to dress this way. Go and buy some clothes. Why are you wearing that?" Christie notes that, Roth likes standing head and shoulders above everyone in the center of the room, serving as a shining example to make other people feel good. Hagar was completely different, a populist who communicated with crowds by showing them how much he was just like them. The main question remained whether Van Halen's sense of humor, fury, and passion could remain intact with Hagar as a vocalist. He also he notes the style and fashion difference between the two. Though not fond of Roth's glittering capes and feather boas, Sammy packed his wardrobe with sleeveless yellow jumpsuits covered with red straps that could have been designed by Ronald McDonald. The quote from David Lee Roth about this little change: "I don't know if there's a Van Halen without David Lee Roth, but I know that nobody cares about Van Halen without David Lee Roth." Boom. The whole David Lee Roth is gay thing, I think Sammy didn't just say that in his autobiography, that came out 10, 15 years ago. I'm pretty sure he said something. There's back and forth in the press about each guy calling the other guy gay. Like David Lee Roth, I think, countered something Sammy said with like, "What kind of a straight heterosexual guy writes love songs about his cars instead of about women?" And it's clever, but I think there were plenty of Sammy Hagar songs written about women up to that point, up to the "I Can't Drive 55," Still makes you laugh though, doesn't it? I mean, well, maybe not you, but it makes me laugh a little bit. And that's what it takes. It's like being in court and presenting evidence that gets stricken from the record, or an outburst that gets stricken from the record. It still resonates with the jury, even if it's not going down in the stenographer's notes, right? It can still affect the perception and the feelings of a jury. Saying stuff like that, if it makes someone laugh, it's winning points. And it's points in David Lee Roth's favor. So if you're a Sammy fan, Sammy can say things that aren't necessarily true, and it still points in his favor as well.
Okay, so we have big party scene, crazy wacky action that has no precedent really. There's no setup for like how we got this many people in here for a party. They just showed up. He just told nice guy Eddie just told people there's gonna be a party, and they showed up for a party, and all kinds of crazy wacky people. It doesn't quite. It's like it maybe it should have been a larger chunk of the film, or perhaps I don't know. It seems like, I'm sorry I'm musing on this in real time. The point I need to get to is that it's the major catalyst at the end for everything falling apart, but solidifies the friendship of our two main male characters, and it somehow, through no direct action, kind of sets up the fact that the two couples are getting back together that started the movie apart, or somewhat apart, and we're supposed to be happy about that, but I don't know. And it doesn't seem like Eileen really needs to be with a guy like Chris Penn. Doesn't seem like that's good. Like, she's starting the first day of school, and he shows up at the end in his convertible. He's like, "Come on, I'll take you to history class." And I was like, well, it's just a high school, dude. It's not like his history class like a block and a half away. If that's the case, then why is she starting her day at the front steps of the school? And why, if you're such a partier, why are you there? How long have you been awake? Like, why are you there at the beginning of the first day of school? This is very, very strange and creepy and pervy. for you to be exerting this much control over the girl who's broken up with you 5 times in this movie. Other than that, there's also just like this comedic thing that doesn't seem to work, where they blew a wall out of the apartment. They blew a bunch of like debris out into the pool. It's really trying to be some kind of a Caddyshack for teenagers almost. And then I was watching the credits. First thing on the credits, I realized, I was wrong about Nancy Wilson from Clarke. She's not laying out in a bikini. Unfortunately, that was not her. By the pool, she's the mother of Tom. She's the wife of Tom and the mother of a little kid. And she's wearing a shirt that says "baby," and then an arrow points to her stomach. So she's pregnant with a second kid when Leah Thompson goes to Tom's house to see if he's there because she misses him. So she's the wife that's getting cheated on. All right, not as hot a prospect as when she was a pretty blonde lady in a convertible that Judge Reinhold is trying to flirt with in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Ah, well.
Right, back to Guitar World 1990 February interview with Eddie Van Halen. I am about to get into a section of this that'll be kind of gear heavy and more tech stuff, and some of it, of course, you've heard before from other interviews, other more retrospective kind of looking back interviews, and sometimes, earlier ones from the era when some of these things were sort of new innovations. And then we'll get into something I don't find a lot of in the research I've done on Van Halen, which is Eddie talking about more of the current day scene, more talking about the players that are out there at the time, of the interview, and opinions on what's going on in modern music. So before that, though, we can talk about some old touring stories. They ask, what is the single most printable memory you have of touring? I think that question is meant to be the most interesting that we can print. Because printable could mean anything that's not libelous, I would think, right? Anyway, it says thinks, then smiles. Oh, Madison, Wisconsin. The Sheraton Inn. We actually thanked them on the back of the second album because we destroyed the whole 7th floor of the hotel. And we tried to blame it on Journey, and he laughs. It almost worked. They threatened to throw us off that tour so many times, which we've covered in a previous episode as well. It was ridiculous. We were wild, man. Oh, God. We had fire extinguisher fights. There was like a foot of water in the hallway, and it seeped down through the floor to the other rooms below us. So the people had to check out. So what's the single most unprintable touring memory? The chicks, man. The chicks on the road. Woof. That first and second tour. Oh, God, man. I can't. Laughs. They ask about how much he still tinkers around and builds guitars. Not as much as I used to. The only reason why I did was because I was trying to find that, well, not necessarily perfect guitar, but the guitar that served my means. I'll show you. Eddie leaves, returning momentarily with his famous striped Strat with the Kramer neck. It does exactly what I want it to do. I used to build guitars because I wanted one with a vibrato bar, but which had a Gibson sound. I wanted a Strat with a Gibson sound, and that's what this is. This thing's all fucked up. Seems like a lot of guitar manufacturers have taken cues from you over the years. Oh, God, tell me about it. The non-pick guard, you were about the first one to... The whole vibrato bar, one pickup thing was my idea. I mean, it was actually a mistake how I came up with it. I bought a Strat. I took a chisel to route out the rear pickup, the one by the bridge, so I could drop a humbucker into it. But as I removed the pick guard and put the new pickup in, I didn't know how to fucking rewire it, I couldn't get the wires back in. So I said, wow, I wonder how it'll work, just straight to the volume knob. So I left it like that. And I think what he's referring to is trying to cram all that extra wire into the control cavity, and then mash the Fender Stratocaster pickguard down in place without the wires poking up the top and getting stuck in between the top of the wood outside the cavity and the bottom of the pickguard, and it's very frustrating. I had a friend with a Strat of his over here on my bench for quite a while. We were trying to fix whatever was going on with his volume controls cutting out. He had a specialized sort of circuit that he had done with 2 master volumes in a 3-way switch, and it was like dead in the middle positions for some reason when I couldn't figure out. Anyway, it was the most inconvenient Stratocaster wiring job I've ever done because he didn't want me to take the strings off of it. And I mean, a lot of you now are like, oh my God, like taking all those pickguard screws out, popping the pickguard out with all the controls stuck underneath it, bolted in there, and then wiggling that out from underneath the strings without scratching the top of the guitar, and having to do that like 6-7 times to try to, troubleshoot the wiring programs, guess and check, That's not all, though. To make it even less convenient, there was an extended fretboard hanging over the front of the pickguard. So this one like had 24 frets or whatever. So you couldn't even just lay that top of the fretboard area down flat and then start bolting it down. You had to go under the strings, wedge the first part under the lip of the fretboard, then start wiggling the rest of it down in and constantly checking where the wires were at. Oh my gosh. Anyways, would have been great if I could have just done what Eddie did and wired a bridge pickup straight to the jack, left the pickguard off. It's a very gutsy move to see the entrails of the guitar just sort of hanging there. So he says, then I made myself a plastic pickguard so it would cover up the holes. And that's how this concept happened. When I used to play Les Pauls, I could never get a good sound out of the front and rear pickups at the same time. It's like if you get a nice fat sound out of the back one and then you put it on the front one, it's real muddy. Either that or you have to set it so bright to get a good sound out of the front one that the back one sounds like shit. So I just said, damn, what do I need 2 pickups for? You don't strike me as a real EQ freak or anything. Oh no, I just turn everything up. Laughter. With some Marshalls, if you turn everything up, there's too much treble or too much bass. Yeah, that's why I use the old ones. Anytime I see an old one, I buy it, even if it sounds like shit, because they can be made to sound good. Is the Variac still a part of your sound? Yep, Now, does that actually change the voltage? Yeah, that's all it does. But you plug the output of the amplifier into the Variac? Yeah, that's all. It's a light dimmer. I use a studio light dimmer. See, that enables you to play at a lower volume, but you can still get the fucking balls of the amp. I blew out the house once when we were living in this little shack in Pasadena. We used to have this little light dimmer in the wall, and I thought, wow, I wonder what'll happen if I hook my amp up to that. Editor's note. This is a very dangerous proceed. Continued on page 126. Should I read every single page between 63 and 126 to you, or should we jump to it? No, not yet. Let's go back to my reactions to watching the wildlife while sounding like I'm on many different drugs.
There's even more disconnect at the end between like a wacky comedy sex romp and a emotionally grounded, a bit of anxiety for young people trying to get out there in the world and become adults. I think there's a little bit of like the main characters take a step back, although they take a step forward. They've tried getting out there in the adult world, and they kind of get themselves checked a bit. The adult world's a bit scary. The adult world is a bit oppressive. It's a bit predatory in some cases here, especially for the girls. So the girls retreat to the comfort of their boyfriends, I guess. The boys get to have their cake and eat it too, in a way. It's all right. It's all right. The scene with Eddie, it's played by Randy Quaid. It's just a quick thing. It's just the 2 young boys go over to his place and hang out with him for like a minute and a half, and he goes to like shoot up heroin in the next room. And the young Joey Lawrence looking kid catches him tied off. And I just don't know what the point of all that was, except for there's a couple of lines from Randy Quaid, telling the kids not to think about war as being a really cool thing, or you're going to end up in like El Salvador or whatever. It was pertinent to current events at the time, and a relevant thing, I think, to point out. I just don't think it was given enough time or gravitas to really there's so much about this movie, you just don't know what the fuck you're supposed to come away with, because I just don't come away with a lot. So, it seems like everyone did the best job they could. There was no one did a poor job of acting. No one, Art Linson did not do a poor job of directing necessarily. It feels like this movie was trying to do too many things at once. It couldn't really stay on track. It appears like it's balanced, but to me, it doesn't feel that way. Just my thoughts. I'm sure lots of folks watched it a billion times in the 80s and loved it. Turns out, I guess, there was a lot of soundtrack music that was removed because they couldn't get the rights to sort of perpetuate it, much like the conversation we had in the heavy metal episode. There was, I guess, some Prince and Madonna songs, other pop songs that were in the theatrical release, but not in home video. I guess they were just trying to figure it out back then in the mid-'80s, trying to work out how to do that stuff. It was just strange because we're only like a year or two away from this TV era that I grew up in, where they just licensed incredibly popular music for television shows. You know, they had Saturday morning cartoons in the mid-'80s there was like 3 cartoons on Saturday mornings that had licensed music just in them. There was one called Kid Video. There was the Alvin and the Chipmunks, and I think there was at least one other one that would just regularly here's a pop song, whether it's being sung by the cartoon characters or it's just a straight up from the radio like pop song that you and then there'd be like, you'd watch a TV show like China Beach or something, and the theme music for that TV show would be the Rolling Stones' Paint It Black, I believe. Similar things like that were happening. All like major network TV shows and dramas just had well-known recorded hit music from back in the day as their theme song. I mean, Wonder Years is a case in point. But they weren't thinking about DVD sales. They weren't thinking about that kind of distribution later, I suppose. They were thinking about reruns, I guess. Maybe when they were drawing up those contracts. I don't know. It's if I could pick the brain of some entertainment lawyer from back in the day, that would be fantastic. If you are an entertainment lawyer from 1985, please call in now.
And now back to the Guitar World feature from 1990. After a word from our sponsor, Radish Lawyers. Radish Lawyers. Can you afford not to? Think about it. I'll jump to it for now, but I'll tell you what you missed in the middle. Dangerous procedure and should not be under any circumstances be attempted. Let's see. Oh, there's the Metal Method Guitar Lessons mail order form. 2 pages of it. Let's see. You're also missing... Oh, there's another top 500 of the 80s. Oh, 50 of the 80s. Like guitar albums, I guess. Van Halen is number 1 with 1984, because we're talking about the 80s. David Lee Roth's Eat 'Em and Smile's pretty far up there, though, too. Down below Blizzard of Oz, which is number 6. U2's War is above David Lee Roth. Get out those angry letter-writing pens. Number 9 is Prince and the Revolution, Purple Rain. Number 10 is Danny Gatton's Unfinished Business, and so on and so on. Then we get on to, cool black and white picture of Vernon Reid from Living Colour sitting in front of a bunch of Mesa Boogie power amps. George Lynch, ESP catalog ad. interview, I guess, with Tom Schultz. All right, I'm not going to read everything that's in, but Rocktron ad for a thing, the Pro Gap Professional MIDI Guitar Preamp. And then we have our transcriptions. So the transcriptions this this issue, Michael Jackson's Beat It, Stevie Ray Vaughan's Texas Flood, and Whitesnake's Still of the Night. All right. So anyways, skipping up ahead to 126. Also stopping by Bedrock Amps. Do you know who was using Bedrock Amps in 1990? None other than Aerosmith's Joe Perry. Apparently, this is a big deal. Because, we all have that reference in our head for the visual and the audio of when we think Joe Perry. We think Bedrock Amps right behind him when he's playing those classic Aerosmith tunes. Yeah. Never seen those before anywhere. Never heard of them. I'm sure they're good. I'm sure they were great. And for some dumb reason, didn't catch on, or some bad business decisions, they didn't last, which would be a shame. I'll have to look into that. Oh, I want to look into the band that Eddie said he was producing too. Find out what happened with that. But anyways, the Variac. Guitar World says, so with the Variac installed, you just lower the dimmer and run the amp up full. It's like a master volume control without lowering the master volume control on the amp. And you get the whole output of the whole amp. Know what I mean? It sounds sweet. What do you think of the guitar sounds we're hearing today? What do you think when you turn on the radio? I think everybody sounds the same, playing-wise, too. It's kind of like incest. We're bound to have a couple of retarded kids after a while. Laughs. Everybody has a Marshall stack now. And a guitar like this, holds up his guitar, or a Les Paul. Nobody's doing anything different. We saw these bands on the Strip the other night, and every guitarist we heard sounded almost identical. Sounds like razor blades coming at your ears after a while. Just fuzzed out noise. Yeah, there's a fine line between clever and stupid. Laughs. Yeah, there's a big valley between those. What was your favorite part of Spinal Tap? The whole movie. The thing is, when I first saw it, it wasn't funny at all because it was so close to home, man. The whole lifestyle of it, everything in that movie had happened to me. The record company parties with all the execs and nobody showing up for things, and the Air Force Base gigs, and the guy who couldn't get out of his pod. All that stuff is real. So the first time I saw it, everyone was laughing. I was sitting there thinking, this isn't funny. A classic flick. They ask him about, what did he... If you were a kid today and there's already Edward Van Halen out there, what would you do to not sound like a carbon copy? That's a hell of a hypothetical question. I don't know. Dig back and buy some old Cream records. Listen to old blues stuff. Get your feel happening instead of just jumping in and playing as fast as you can, copying the latest hit on the radio. I mean, I don't know what scales are. I just play what sounds right to me. I never had a lesson in my life, so this scale or that scale, I don't know. To me, you have 12 notes to work with, and whatever configuration you work with is up to you. But you didn't study music theory? As a turn of the page, past a Cayman Nichols guitar string company ad, quarter-page ad with Skid Row, Scotty Hill, and Dave Snake Sabo. And then Cayman always had ugly packaging. Jesus Christ. And then Rivera amps. Remember those? I worked for 7 years in a store that sold those in the Northwest. Probably one of the very few places you could get one. And boy, oh boy, they were heavy and complex. Win this Signature Series guitar rig valued at $8,965. That is a steal. Wow. Because it's Reb Beach's, I guess it's supposed to be like his rig or something. There's an Ibanez RG 560. There's EMG pickups in it. There's guitar case, Hughes & Kettner Cream Machine screams with creamy sustain. This compact hot-rodded all-tube amp preamp sings like the only overdriven power tubes can. Plus, built-in cabinetulator delivers a great stack tone straight to tape. Wow, that's early cabinet emulators from Hughes & Kettner. ART SGE Studio Guitar Effector, a stunning new super effector that does 9 effects at once: compressor, exciter, pitch, transposer, all the effects of multiverb and amazing distortion, and overdrive for real-time performance MIDI. Oh, and it looks ugly as hell, or beautiful, depending on your aesthetic leanings. Nady Wireless, BBE, what is it? It's the 422. It doesn't say what it is. It's maybe that's the sonic maximizer of the time. It makes chords that are rich and fully textured. Each note in the chord retaining its integrity. Anyway, then the Rivera TBR I1SL all-tube stereo amp, 120 watts RMS, 2 independent channels of gain and EQ, a wide variety of lead and rhythm, voicings, stereo effects, loop, reverb, and PC OMP, whatever that is. And there's apparently a 412 cab from Rivera as well with JBLs in there. Jesus, that's got to weigh 1 million pounds. Whew. But back to Van Halen. Yes, he didn't take music theory lessons as a kid. I was supposed to. It takes too long to learn. I don't even like to read books. If I had to learn to read music, I'd take forever. And they do, is ignorance bliss then? No, I think it's green on both sides, as long as you don't get too caught up in that reading the chart syndrome. So here we go with the, what do you think about these guys portion? They ask him about the Edge, who doesn't have a whole lot of chops, but he still created a sound. An identifiable sound. He sure likes his echo, doesn't he? But see, there again, he's more of a songwriter, and that's where it's at. Expressing yourself in a song is a lot more wide open than all these kids who are just gunslingers. They'll come around. You can't be doing that all your life. It's impossible. Do you ever feel, I don't know, responsible in a very small way for the emphasis on speed playing today? For kids playing like typewriters? Hey, that's not my fault. Maybe they cop the speed because they can't cop my feel. Maybe they shouldn't think so much. I don't think when I play. I get the basic parts of the song, and then when I start soloing, I don't think. They mentioned the sound of Finish What You Started being kind of a departure for him. It's a direct strat. It was just for fun. We actually set out and tried to do something different, something goofy, and it worked. Too early to talk about what you might do on the next record? Ooh, anything and everything. Sammy and I are already writing, and we're coming up with some really neat shit. He says that he comes up with the music, Eddie, that is, and then Sammy calls him and comes up with a concept, an idea. God, I don't want to give anything away here. He'll inspire me to write something, and then when I do, I'll inspire him in turn to write the lyrics to it. And then we sit down together and work it out. And then Alan might jump in and say, we don't like that. Laughs. No, I'm kidding. We never really write in the studio. The studio is just where we go to record. I sit around my guitar and a little cassette machine. We've never had the luxury to do what we're doing right now, and that's stockpiling a bunch of tunes. And then when we're ready to putting it out, because 5150, everybody's wondering what's going on with Van Halen. So we put it out, and with OU812, we were already committed to do the Monsters of Rock before the record was even done. Sorry if you just heard a ding. That's my phone. Even though I have the silent mode on, it's coming through the Mac, apparently. God damn it. So don't you love that about this show? I'm not professional enough to isolate myself from every little sound, but I'm also not professional enough to go back and edit them out. If you did hear them, right now I'm not even checking to see if it's in the track anyway. And then endlessly bitching and moaning about it every single time it happens. Yeah, you lucky people. We were talking about Sammy and releasing the album, and they asked him. Let's see, there's a tour. We would have liked to have finished the record, put it out, waited a bit, made sure that we liked the record, and then booked a tour. And that's what we're gonna do this time. A lot of people slammed us for the Monsters of Rock tour, but we sold a lot of tickets. Not a lot of them were sold out, but hey, they're stadiums. That same year, Aerosmith and Guns N' Roses did the same thing, and they only sold like 30,000 seats outdoors. I didn't hear anybody ragging about that. You receive so much flack about playing keyboards. Do you think people still don't see you as a keyboard player? I love playing keyboards, man. I write a lot of stuff on keys. It's like they don't want to realize that I play keyboards. See, here's the thing. When Dave was in the band, he was going, hey, man, nobody wants to see you play keyboards. And I was like, fuck you. If I want to play keyboards or if I want to play tuba, I'll play it. He notes that he just likes dicking around with sounds. He's not as much of a, tinkerer with the equipment on keys as he is with the guitar. I love the old OB8s because they're hands-on, you know. You can just turn a knob and change the sound. You don't have to be a computer whiz. Nice thick sound, too. I think they sound better than the digital stuff. People associate you so much with note-heavy solos, but your solo in Dreams is surprising. For roughly half the solo, you're only playing 2 notes. Yeah, it just felt right. When I'm behind the console overdubbing, I just go, let's try this. If that doesn't work, I'll try something else. Sometimes I get a solo right off. Other times, I'll be doing it all afternoon and nothing. Do you have much of a problem with writer's block? Sure, don't you? Sometimes things just don't come. So I'll walk away from it. Actually, sometimes I'll try and work through it. I'll get pissed off and think, I got to beat this thing. But then other times it doesn't work. There's no rule. Sometimes it can happen for you, sometimes not. Put it this way. If you're up for 24 hours and you're getting nowhere, it's time to call it quits. They mention the good relationship they had, lately with the rock press, but up until 84, it seemed like they couldn't get many good reviews. And Eddie says, I think they just realized that we're here to stay, It's like a roach that won't go away, so finally it's, okay, stay. It used to piss me off because some of these guys didn't know what they were talking about. If you don't like what someone does, then say you don't like it. But don't say it stinks. I mean, who are they to say something isn't good? At least say that you just don't like it as a personal preference, an opinion. They then bring up, how great the backup vocals are, and people don't talk about that enough. And Eddie just talks about, that's Michael and him. It's a unique part of the Van Halen sound. I don't really care if people comment or not. That's just the way we are. He said, I'm not a singer, but I can hit a note. I have good pitch. Endurance is tough. 2 beers, 3 songs, and I'm out. He notes that, Michael Anthony's not a showboat kind of guy. He's not into doing all that stuff. Part of the reason why I stick out so much is that Mike doesn't steal the show. I mean, if he wanted to hog the show, so to speak, we'd be butting heads. And if we tried to do unison things, what would be the point? I like the guys on the 3 instruments to be playing their own thing. I don't want everybody doing things together. The counterpoint thing, that's what I like, just like the old Cream jams. They're all in their own worlds, but it works. Let's look ahead 10 years. Do you see yourself doing the same thing with the same band? Oh yeah, definitely. I'm totally into family, so to speak. There's no reason why I can't be doing the same thing, I just want to make music and have fun. As long as you have the fire and you still want to do it, fine. When it starts getting old to me, then I'll start doing something else. I don't know what. Maybe a race car driver. They ask about Russia and Eastern Europe now that those are kind of opening up. Would Van Halen be able to, hit the road out there? I remember watching Russian kids interviewed on 60 Minutes, and they asked them who they liked, and they're going, Bruce Springsteen, Van Halen, rock and roll. They have underground records. Sure, I'll play anywhere they let me. Now let me check up on that band I mentioned, or that he mentioned earlier, and see what they did. Watch me find out like one of the members of the band was like Trent Reznor or something. All right, I have found some stuff. And I think we'll just take the audio from the man himself. You've been listening to my voice yapping for hours and hours at a time, and my guitar playing. I'm sure that makes you yearn for another voice, and maybe that of Eddie Van Halen himself. So I'll play this clip from a YouTube video you can look up as well for the full thing. It's 5 minutes, 12 seconds long, titled Eddie Van Halen promo video for the band Private Life. It says, Eddie Van Halen promo interview clip for the band he produced, Private Life. Date on VHS case is 2/8/89. So, same time as the interview. The interview is published the same month that this is supposedly recorded. And obviously, I'm not doing like 5 minutes of audio from the promo video. It's more about you getting to know the band after Eddie introduces via his story of having first seen the band.
Private Life came into your life.
Back in 1984, Valerie and I were out in Shreveport, Louisiana, and her younger brother took us out on the town and introduced us to Kelly Bresnick, who's the lead singer. And I ended up jamming with them, and I was really impressed with her voice. A little petite little chick like that, screaming and yelling. how I got to producing the record actually was I was in the middle of working with Sammy Hagar on his last solo record, and my wife Valerie had talked Don Landy, Van Halen's engineer, into doing a demo with them. And I came home one night from working with Sammy, and I walked in and I heard Last Heartbeat, you know, the upcoming single, and I went, whoa, you know, this is a happening tune, man. I wish I would have wrote it. You know, it's a happening song.
That's quite enough of that. Thank you very much. If you want to hear more, obviously go check out the video, check out the band's releases. They had 2 of them. One of them came out in around 80. That was this era was around 88, Shadows. And then they had a self-titled, Private Life, came out in 1990. Both were on Warner Brothers. Apparently, it was put together by a guy named Danny Johnson and the keyboard player Jennifer Blakeman. Danny, was a guitarist for Rick Derringer, Rod Stewart, Axis, Alcatraz, and played on Alice Cooper's Special Forces album. Supposedly, he was also in the running to take over for the slot that Joe Perry left when he removed himself from Aerosmith in 1979 over. Was it over Spilled Milk? Was that the one that was all over Spilled Milk? No. There was another thing. I forget which person departing or the breakup or the almost. Never mind. I haven't read Walk This Way in a long time, but I know there was one portion of the story where someone, I think Steven Tyler says, or maybe one of the less interesting 3. We literally broke up over Spilled Milk because somebody's girlfriend or wife, dumped it on someone else's girlfriend or wife backstage in catering, or knocked it over onto her. There was a cat fight, and all the guys came out and started fighting with each other, defending the honor of their own wives or girlfriends, whatever the hell it was. Joe Perry would break up with that woman after going solo and meet his later wife, Billy. I wouldn't even be talking about Aerosmith that much if it wasn't for the fact that I just seen that ad. The ad for whatever amps I've already forgotten the name of. Bad Rock, whatever it was. Hard Bed. Rock Boulder. Tough Boulder. Like a rock amps. Now, curious about the YouTube channel that this is posted on. It's Steecoe, Steecoe. He's got 5.58 thousand subscribers and 188 videos. What comes up on the first page, though, is his little. It says "RIP EVH" next to his little avatar, which with the Van Halen album cover, the last one they did, with the big old train on it, and then there's videos are like public school holiday concerts and stuff, and there's a Van Halen in Nashville, April 27th, 2012, full show. Yeah, it looks like a bunch of... No, there's some Metallica footage. There's some Eddie Van Halen, Sammy Hagar interview stuff. Yeah, fucking A. Kenny Wayne Shepherd stuff. This guy gets out. Looks like he gets out and films things that are musical. So maybe check him out. Steeco on YouTube. Give him a like and a subscribe and a nice comment. A history of rock and roll and film and rock and roll sent me here. Huh? How about that? How about you do a little networking for me? And while we're at it, maybe, if you enjoy the show and want to see more of it in your feed, and why wouldn't you? And you're willing to click on a couple of things, and why wouldn't you? Maybe make sure that this stays in the view of your feed if you're on YouTube by hitting a subscribe and a like and a thumbs up thing. And leave a comment or two about what you liked on the episodes. If you're listening on the Apple thing, please leave a review. I don't care if it's 1 star or 5. 1 star that says something nice is funny. 5 stars that says something mean is funny. Anywhere in between is fine too. Any activity where you interact with this on some platform helps, I guess, probably us be noticed. It's just me. The show get noticed easier. And it keeps it from falling out of your main feed on whatever platform you subscribe with. That's it for today. Remember, rock and roll is the best. And so are you. Ha!
Please remember to replace the speaker on the post when you leave the theater.
Rock and roll music and why I preach against it, and I believe with all of my heart that it is a contributing factor to our juvenile delinquency of today.
It made me think just a little bit in public again. Bob Dylan said one time, he said to me, Bobby D said, you know, sometime life is a drag, sometime life is a bust, but we all got to do what we must. We got to keep on, keep it on, baby.
I'm putting it down, ain't I? I ain't hearing no amens, but I ain't wanting any. No. Hell, fire. Hell, fire. All right.